All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a post-COVID Manhattan City and State's discussion about what we've learned and what does the future look like. No, we are not saying that we are currently in a post-COVID Manhattan, but one day we're going to get there. I am Jeff Colton, a senior reporter for City and State. And most importantly for today, I'm a newly minted Manhattan resident. I used to live in Brooklyn, but I recently joined the borough last month. So somebody should tell the New York Times, do a think piece on me. Manhattan is still growing, so it's good to hear. I would now like to, we're going to start a great discussion with some of Manhattan's most powerful elected officials. We have those lists from City and State in the chat function right now. Our top 10 most powerful elected officials in Manhattan, the Manhattan Power 50, and then also some of our Manhattan COVID heroes. People have really stepped up in this difficult time and risen to the occasion. But right now, I would like to hand it over to the Director of Government Affairs at Charter Communications with some remarks, Alex Camarda.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and good evening to our virtual audience and distinguished panelists. It's an honor to be part of this wonderful event this evening, recognizing those who have stepped up and gone above and beyond during these very challenging and uncertain times. I'm looking forward to the spirited discussion that will focus on the important issues facing our borough and our city. In particular, I'm honored to represent my company, Charter Communications, better known as Spectrum, as the sponsor of this event. I think it's fair to say that 2020 has been a year like no other, particularly here in Manhattan, where we've had to overcome and adapt to the struggles before us, like much of the rest of the city. And amidst the uncertainty and challenges, it's always comforting to look to the good in our lives to provide a bit of normalcy. And that's where all of you come in. As we've seen countless times in crises before us, there's always a set of people who run to the crisis. They're the leaders and the heroes, as this event so aptly calls them. I'm particularly proud to say that one of our Spectrum managers in Manhattan, James Solis, is included in that list because of the critical work that he and his team did to make essential locations like the US Navy ship, the Comfort, wired when she was on the dock of the West Side earlier this year. And his work is really indicative of what so many of our workers at Spectrum do to ensure our network is reliable and secure, even with a large surge in the use of the internet that we've been seeing. Many companies have assisted their customers during these trying times. We've seen contributions to food banks dramatically increase. Companies have converted their operations to make ventilators and produce PPE. Stakeholders are coming together to address the effects of the pandemic. Spectrum's also contributed. We provided free internet to student and educator households at the end of the last school year, so kids could engage in online learning. And we relaunched that program a few weeks ago with the start of the school year that began in September. And we've put in place programs to help small businesses get back on their feet. We've voluntarily pledged to be part of the FCC's Keep America Connected program. And our technician and representative workforce have stayed on the job to help our customers stay in touch with the very information they need. And we and others have done this because it was the right thing to do and because we're part of this community. Our offices are here, a vast majority of our employees live in the communities we serve, and we're continually investing in the city. So with that, I want to say to the Manhattan Power 50 and the Manhattan COVID heroes being recognized, I congratulate each of you for your individual accomplishments and for being on these lists today. Congratulations to all of you. And in closing, I really look forward to hearing the thoughts of our elected officials on the panel today. Their collective experience and leadership is certainly provides a reassuring stability during these turbulent times. With that, I'll turn it back to Jeff to introduce those distinguished leaders. Thank you again.
Hey, thank you so much, Alex, and want to thank our other sponsors as well today. Charter Spectrum represented there, also Glenwood, the Central Park Conservancy, Fontis Advisors, LAK Public Relations, the New York Landmarks Conservancy, and Northwell Health. Thank you for sponsoring this event. And with that, I've got to introduce our esteemed panel. I will say that Congressman Adriano Espaillat will be joining us later. He is busy trying to secure $2 trillion from the federal government for New York, but he can talk more about that when he joins us. But for now, I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. As I warned them ahead of time, it's easy to find reasons to be disappointed and gloomy in these last 7-8 months of the pandemic. I would like our elected officials with us to introduce themselves and also to just give me one reason for optimism regarding the future of Manhattan. And with that, I'll hand it over to Senator Benjamin. Please start.
Well, first of all, I want to thank City and State for this forum. It's always an honor to spend time in a conversation with Senator Liz Krueger, Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer. They are two of the finest elected officials you'll ever find, so I'm glad to be here with them. My name is Brian Benjamin. I'm the state senator representing Harlem, East Harlem, and the Upper West Side. I am very excited about one thing in particular, and that is really the ingenuity of some of our small businesses. These are some of our restaurants. It has been amazing to see how some of our restaurants have just come up with amazing ideas to try to take advantage of the outdoor dining right on 8th Avenue. And I know our borough president was very involved in this. We have opened up the streets for a number of our small restaurants, and some of the structures that they've built and interesting techniques they've used to really try to encourage a sense of community in the midst of something that is, the worst kind of crisis I've seen in my lifetime, has really been amazing to watch. And so I want to give a big thumbs up to a lot of our small businesses who are the beating heart of our society, who've really stepped up in a very challenging time.
Thank you, Senator Benjamin. We're definitely going to be talking more about small businesses in this conversation. To Senator Krueger, please introduce yourself and tell us a reason to be optimistic.
Thank you so much. I also appreciate this opportunity to all be together. And yes, I'm here with some of my favorite colleagues in government. And maybe that is one of the things I'm optimistic about. What we are seeing, despite the fact that we're living through a pandemic, where way too many people have died, way too many people have gotten sick, and we're still nervous about what's around the corner, we have also seen government innovate quickly and effectively, dealing with issues 6 months ago, 7 months ago, no one would have imagined or discussing even. But when there was a crisis in people getting access to food, as the restaurants had to close and the schools closed and the senior centers closed, the city took on responsibility for basically feeding every single New Yorker who came and said, who called and said, I need help, I need food. And we did it in a city of 8.5 million people. And it was amazing to see how many people just came together and defined themselves as essential workers, even though it was armies of volunteers helping the city prepare that food for everyone. The same story in our hospitals. No matter how horrible it was, and it was, and I have a disproportionately large number of the major hospitals in my district, people still showed up for work every day. They walked back into those hospitals to save people's lives. Even though they didn't really understand anything too much about COVID at the beginning, weren't really sure how it was transferring from person to person, and yet they still showed up, put their own lives on the line to take care of each other. And for me, in really bad times, what you can count on in New York City is people will come together and they will be angry at each other. There were protests going on during all of this, justified protests going on during all this, but they will come together and take care of each other. And that's why I know Manhattan will come back bigger and stronger than ever when we get a vaccine and can finally go back to normal.
Thank you so much, Senator. And on to Borough President Gale Brewer. If you could introduce yourself and give us a reason for optimism.
Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you, City and State. And to be honest with you, Brian Benjamin and Liz Krueger are as good as it gets. So it's an honor to be here with them. And you know me, I don't like most people. So the second, I just want to echo what Brian said about the small businesses and what Liz said about the amazing essential workers. I think what maybe combines them is just this volunteerism. Because yes, amazing food distribution at NYCHA, for instance, because we worked with Fresh Direct, and I know Brian did also in the NYCHA development. So what that meant though was it wasn't just dropping off the food. It meant that the tenant leader had to get volunteers to find the seniors who needed that food. And they didn't just do it once. They did it from middle of March all the way until the end of September, every single week. That's a lot of getting your volunteers to be interested to get the food there. The same thing, of course, as Liz knows, in the food pantries. That wasn't just paid staff. Those were people who showed up day after day to make sure people got food. And cleaning. Since the pandemic and even during, I don't know, something happened with the sanitation budget, cut 65% for weekday service and almost 100%, maybe a little bit less for the weekend service. But right now, as we know, we're out there every single day, whether it's Harlem, Lower East Side, West Side, East Side, all these folks are volunteering their time to go clean up. And the same thing with just making sure seniors in general. I don't know how many thousands of Manhattanites went up and down the elevators to make sure that those seniors got food. They went and bought food and got the food to that senior. And the list goes on and on and on. So I think that's hopefully will continue, because that was you have the indivisible folks who do that. You have the mutual aid folks who do that. There's so many different groups that have started now to take care of their seniors and families and each other and their neighbors and their community. So I would say that that's a silver lining, if there isn't much from this horrible pandemic. The fact that all these groups have been real and not just for the, some kind of glorification. I would say that in addition, now I just want to say something fabulous about Frederick Douglass Boulevard. So my son was in town, we go out for dinner. I had my sister-in-law and some other relatives, and we go to a restaurant, and it was outdoors on that beautiful strip. It was hysterical. First thing were the fireworks. This was not the 4th of July, Jeff. We had a full firework demonstration. They were excellent. They could compete with Macy's. Then the next thing we had was an amazing opportunity to see racing cars, the kind that are wireless. And they had an entire street to, etc. I wanted to say something about the artists, because the other thing that happened on a volunteer basis was when the plywood was up on so many stores, then these amazing artists showed up and they did these incredible pieces of public art. The artists are also part of this outdoor experience that I hope continues, because it's a draw for outsiders, but it's also something when we couldn't get into museums and we still don't have any live performances. Yes, there are some musicians out there and they're terrific and we need more of them. So I would say the outdoor art in its broadest form is also a tiny, tiny public free art I've always been supportive of. It's a tiny silver lining.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And actually, just a quick note, I see a lot of questions that are both in the Q&A and in the chat. I do just want to say that I'm hoping to grab a couple of the best questions from the Q&A. So if you have them, please throw them in. Please upvote your favorite questions, and I will ask our panelists later in the event. So from all of your answers about why we should be optimistic, it was clear that Manhattan is a very diverse community. The artists, the fireworks, the small businesses, and yet we also have to face the fact that Manhattan is the financial center. So much business, so much tax revenue comes from this borough. So my first question looks at that. I mean, what is this borough's role in reviving the entire city's economy? Looking at tax revenue, looking at that commercial space. And I'd like to start again with Senator Benjamin, who, if he doesn't mention it himself, I should note, he's running for city controller. So he's somebody that's probably interested in talking about these issues. So Senator Benjamin, please tell us what's this borough's role in the city's economy?
Sure. I mean, first of all, thank you, Jeff. This is a very troubling time. And I just this past weekend was at a rally where I had to go to the restroom at Columbus Circle. And this was Saturday at 2 p.m. And normally, pre-COVID, a Saturday at 2 p.m. at Columbus Circle, that place is buzzing. You have so much activity, so many people are in the multiple stores that are there. And all of that is very much tied to our sales tax revenue. And that has been just depleted. Sometimes during the week, I drive downtown, the commercial spaces there, office space, it's practically empty. And so, we really have to figure out, I think Liz mentioned this earlier, the vaccine / rapid testing sort of structure has to get put in place as soon as possible, because if the city relies on us for property taxes and sales taxes, in addition to personal income taxes, thanks Liz to your district, we have got to get the economy moving again, and primarily get it moving in a way that's safe for people, where we can get that foot traffic. There's so many street vendors and sort of what I like to call on-the-fly businesses that require and need a lot of foot traffic that are really just decimated. What happens to those individuals? How do they find work, and how do they move forward? In addition to the crisis that means for our tax revenue. So it's a very big concern. It's something that we are paying a lot of close attention to, but I don't know how you can really move forward on that without a vaccine and rapid testing.
Absolutely. And Senator Krueger, to you, I mean, what's this borough's role in reviving the economy?
So I'd like to take a slightly different approach to it, if that's okay with Jeff. I don't think our assignment is to figure out how we make sure taxes get paid when people have money. I think our assignment is to make sure we in government do whatever we can to speed along what the next phase of our economy is going to be post-COVID in Manhattan Island. What do we know about Manhattan? New York City in general, but really Manhattan. It's where entrepreneurs have always come to create and try new things. And they have been entrepreneurs from other parts of the country, other parts of the region, and the world. New York City's strength is that it's always going to be a place where people from around the world and around the US want to come to make their fortunes, to create new things, and to start new businesses. So when I look at the strength of Manhattan, and it's very much some of the things that my colleagues already touched on, we're the center of an arts universe that we are perfectly prepared to go right back into being. And an arts universe means you're drawing in the young people who are creative and coming up with new ideas for performing art, for painting, for music, for dance, for tech art, because now everything is tied in with computers. And they all want to be here because they want to be with each other. And you know what that then blows up into? Advertising and the creativity of people who go into more of the business model in the arts of advertising. And museums tie into auction houses with giant auctions with people around the world buying and selling. And there's a lot of research showing that entrepreneurship and new businesses are the businesses that create the jobs and create the new opportunities that then springboard. And that's the story of New York City, and that's certainly the story of Manhattan. And so I'm actually feeling pretty confident that post-COVID, where things have been bad everywhere, that same universe of talented young entrepreneurial spirit will still want to aim for Manhattan. Now, maybe they'll be doing different things. So maybe they won't need as much commercial space for their offices. And maybe they won't need as much retail space, because I don't think we're reversing very much of the tech expansion that we've seen really skyrocket in the last few months. So I think people are still going to shop sitting in front of their computers. And that's going to mean a different story of retail. And we're going to have to adjust, and our building model is going to have to adjust. And I don't know that companies will ever take as much square footage per person as they did in the past, because they've realized they don't have to and it's expensive. So I guess if I owned commercial buildings, I might be nervous, but I don't think that it's necessarily bad for the future of the city of New York if everybody's using up a little less commercial space, because maybe you'll just get more people in less space, or the commercial building people will also realize it's time to adjust our business model because the old ways aren't coming back. So I'm really intrigued with what the generation coming up after Gale, Brian, and myself are going to be doing in their taking over the world situation. And look, finance has become a tech industry in the city. So it's still the center of finance, but it's now fintech, not necessarily what you used to think of as just banks sitting in buildings. That's not what finance is anymore. And so we've moved more and more into everything being some relationship to tech. The future of scientific and research is going to be tech driven in some of the research labs that we've built all over Manhattan in the last decade. Quite a few up on the Upper West Side and quite a few in my district on the East Side. So we have these buildings filled with young, smart medical engineers, biomedical engineers, creating things maybe just as much on a computer screen as in a lab with petri dishes, but they're the next generation of scientific technology. I mean, there's a reason why everyone was so excited about Bloomberg's idea to build the tech university on Roosevelt Island, because he was seeing then what the future was going to bring for New York City. And I think that the pandemic will have sped up where we're going and how we're getting there.
Senator, you raised so many interesting questions about the future of Manhattan, but also I want to note, I'm glad that you mentioned Roosevelt Island. I'm hoping we get a Marble Hill mention in here too, so we can get all parts of Manhattan.
Okay.
Maybe Governor's Island, somebody throw that in too. But I do want to throw it over to the BP. If you could tell us, what do you think is Manhattan's role in reviving the city's economy post pandemic?
I mean, Liz and Brian are correct in the sense that we have always been the place of certainly innovation, creativity, and finance. And tech is definitely the glue. But I think it's interesting because when Dan Grodnick and I did the East Midtown rezoning, we were told, may not work, Gale, because, Hudson Yards, financial district gets a break tax-wise on some of those buildings. You're really taking a big, big risk. Now, of course, interestingly enough, I think One Vanderbilt's doing well. I assume that the other buildings, God knows what the Roosevelt Hotel ends up being. The reason I mention that is they're very close to Grand Central. And the thinking, don't know if it's correct, is that people will want to come in from the suburbs, because they do, to Manhattan to work, and they want to walk. They'll want to just get right close to their business, and they won't have to take any other kinds of transportation. So in fact, East Midtown may do well. Who knows? But I'm just saying everything is a little upside down, and you have to figure out what may not work in the past is going to work in the future. I do want to point out, before I say all the role in the economy is what it has been in the past. We did lose 65 million tourists. And when I was recently on the Lower East Side or in Chinatown, and there's a Chatka, New York memorabilia kind of material, the woman who owned the store said she had gotten $3 in sales the day before. That hurts. So the tourism industry, and of course we know all the dollars, the billions of dollars it brings in, 300,000 workers in the tourism industry. So we do have to build that back, and we could talk maybe more about how to do that, but that is something that is challenging right now, and we need it back. I think maybe only 20% of office workers are back in Manhattan now. And we hear about the stories of the vendor who is on the street and doesn't have as much business, or the restaurant, et cetera. But we need to get them back. And obviously in the big tech companies, some of them, Google, Microsoft, they are gobbling up square footage at the same time they're telling some of their workers to work at home. But I do think people need to come back to work. And I think New York One had a story today that said people are basically half happy on the subway and half not happy on the subway. But people are optimistic. That was a very good survey. I also want to say Manhattan, we have the other challenges. A lot of affluent residents have been gone for part or all of the pandemic. We certainly learned that. We were able to get the 35,000 people who requested an absentee ballot in June. And we mailed to all of them in Connecticut and upstate and on the island. But that's just a small percentage. I heard it was 420,000 who actually part-time or full-time took off. That hurts Manhattan. It doesn't hurt the other boroughs as much. And of course, there's Broadway theaters. I assume they'll open next summer, according to Charlotte St. Martin. But it's 92,000 people, and of course, about 14 billion that brings in the excitement and the jobs to that industry. And that's a big part of Manhattan. And even just walking on the High Line, people coming from other parts of the city or the metropolitan area, people might say, now I'd rather just be at, Cunningham Park or wherever, Prospect Park. So Manhattan has always been the place you go with the excitement, the crowds, the creativity, the nightclubs. The nightclubs are also $14 billion in terms of the economy. So it's hard right now, but those are some of the issues that have to be addressed in order to be a post-pandemic. I think people want to be here, as Liz indicated and Ryan indicated. They want to come back. They want to see Harlem. We have to think, and I'm on the board of NYC and Company, I think we have to think local. We have to be tourists ourselves. After 9/11, it's patriotic to come from the Midwest to New York, right, to go to the show. We have to figure out what's the equivalent of that act for all of us. And maybe we have to be somewhat of the tourists, ourselves. It is true that in other parts of the metropolitan area or other boroughs, there wasn't that same leaving, and the local stores might be doing better than the retail in Manhattan. The rents are high here. We have that stupid commercial rent tax. But, we did hurt in some ways more than other places because people didn't leave. They went to their local stores. They haven't taken off in the same sense. We have, and also we just have huge costs. The cost of living in this borough is phenomenal. And we're not-
I'd like to actually talk more about the small businesses. Well, actually, first of all, I really would like a commitment from the borough president that when the nightclubs do open, that you'll be there on opening night, midnight, 1 a.m. Really welcome us back to this club scene.
Absolutely.
I'll join her as well, Jeff, just so it's the right thing to do. I'll just be there for moral support.
Everybody's invited. But wanted to talk about, the small businesses. I mean, that question was really about the future of, how Manhattan can help. But I mean, let's look at the present, and I'd like to ask Senator Krueger directly this one. What can government do for these small businesses, so many of which have closed in Manhattan, so many of which are closing permanently with no plans to reopen? And, is there anything that can be done? And I guess in the interest of time, let's try and give one idea. I know there's so many.
Not one answer, Jeff. So if they closed because, they were a restaurant or someplace that we said you're not allowed to be open, then I believe that they will come back as the law and public health allows them to. Some are gone and won't come back, but new entrepreneurs will come into those spaces. Some are, again, maybe they've just aged out of the economic cycle because people are going to handle things differently. Now, here's where I'm really controversial. I think that real estate in New York, in Manhattan, was just way too overheated. It was too expensive, residential and commercial. If the real estate industry takes a look and says, we get them back if we lower our costs, I think that is a good thing for Manhattan and even all of New York City. It might not be for you if you happen to be the actual landlord, if your costs or your revenue is going to go down. But when you have overheated parts of the economy, that triggers all kinds of other issues. If you spend all your money paying your rent and utilities, you have nothing to spend on anything else anyone wants to sell to you. So I'm not that concerned. I think we need to have some balancing out, and that right now, some in real estate have been negotiating lower prices, and some have been saying, no, I don't have to, I'm going to wait it out. I think they'll see that they do have to negotiate lower prices to get businesses to stay or to come back. And I think that that's actually okay and probably healthy for the borough of Manhattan.
So I'll jump in on that, Jeff. One, I think that, we as government told businesses they had to shut down because we had to keep ourselves safe. So I don't believe that commercial businesses should be evicted because of COVID-related loss of income that didn't allow them to pay rent. So I think that there should be protections for those businesses who want to stay but need some time to pay their rent. I do want to add a caveat to Liz's point, because she's making a very important point around the value of real estate is too high, and so therefore it needs to be readjusted. There's another piece of that, which is we as a city, our number one revenue source is property taxes that is sort of fueled on this overheated market. And so I agree with Liz, but when we do that, that's going to now blow up the financial plan that our mayor has put forward for the next 5 years that has this ever increasing property tax number, which I don't think is realistic. And then now we have another strain on how we're going to meet the spending needs of the city of New York. So I think we've got to figure out how to do both at the same time, Jeff.
No doubts. Just a note to our attendees, I see a lot of good Q&As in the Q&A section, Q&A window. Please, if you like a question, click the little thumbs up, and I will try and pick the best questions for the end. So give them some upvotes.
Jeff, I just want to say one quick thing, which is that by February, every single owner of every single storefront in terms of the ownership of the building has to put into the Department of Finance a database as to where the storefront is and the size of the rentable floor area and the current rent, or what it was. That'll at least give us the data. We don't know what's vacant right now. We have no clue. We just say it's terrible. I know we walked up and down Broadway in 2017 and again in 2020 in August, and we said it was a 78% increase in vacancies, but we don't really know. So that data, I think, will be very helpful in February 2021.
There are a lot of reporting bills that go through the city council. That one seems like a very good one. I know we're all eager to see, yes, just how extensive the empty storefronts in Manhattan are. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about all the changes that we've seen in Manhattan lately with Hudson Yards, with the buildings in Billionaires Row, towers going up on the Lower East Side, but also more human scale things. We're talking about pedestrianized streets and the proposal of building more densely in neighborhoods like Soho. I want to open it up to all of you, and I'll start with the BP for this one. What are the ways that you want to see Manhattan, the built environment, change in the next few years?
Well, I mean, just in terms of the streets, that's a good question. I'm a big believer. I know that Tim Tompkins has suggested this from the Times Square Alliance and the Municipal Art Society, of a public realm or public space czar. To answer your question, I think it might help the small businesses, but it'll help pedestrians. Think of all the agencies who pay attention or don't pay attention to the streets and sidewalks. You've obviously got, business, you've got buildings, you've got health, you've got the state liquor authority, you've got the MTA, and the list goes on. It's about 20 or 25 different agencies, consumer affairs. Oh my goodness. And the reason I say that is that they don't coordinate. In other words, how could you use, we're very excited about the outdoor restaurants, but could art somehow be part of that or whatever? We need somebody to coordinate that agency and that space. The second issue is the built environment. Yes, I'm quite familiar with. We've done 159 ULIPs in our office in the last 7 years, and each one is a nightmare, to be honest with you. But I do think that would be something. There's a big cut in the affordable. We would like to see more HPD money. There was a 40% cut to the affordable housing capital program by the mayor in this budget. We would like to see that not be cut. We have got to find affordable housing. So if we're going to build, right now, as you know, under the MIH, which is a mandatory inclusionary housing, is only 25%. When there is some kind of a zoning change or text change to a building, you only get a certain amount. I would like to see that 50% at least. And I'd also like to see a plan. We have no plan. I am stuck constantly with this rezoning or that rezoning and trying to figure out at the last minute what the city ULIP process is going to look like. I tried to get pre-planning into the charter, the most recent charter. And to be honest with you, it was shot down by the mayor's people on that charter revision panel. So I'm frustrated by the lack of planning. Yes, I am for as much and wherever I can build in the built environment, affordable housing. The project downtown, those 2 bridges project, which you sort of mentioned, it hasn't been decided yet, just so you know. I will tell you that the amount of public affordable housing is ridiculously small in those 4 towers, and they're huge. So you can have a discussion about the size of the towers. You could have a discussion about the affordable housing and all the amenities that do or do not, no plan. And that's what I'm particularly frustrated about.
Senator Benjamin, over to you. What changes to the built environment of Manhattan would you like to see happen, whether that's rezonings, open streets, whatever?
I can't agree with my borough president more. Before being a senator, I was a chair of land use for Community Board 10 and a chair of the board. And I can tell you, we had no plan doing Bloomberg, and we have no plan now. I think that we should have a citywide plan that says this is the amount of affordable housing we need, and more specifically, these are the income targeted amount of affordable housing we need. And then we need to have a equitable plan that comes from the city that says we are going to sort of implement this plan across the city, and everyone's going to be a piece. We're going to have some affordable housing in the Upper East Side and in Soho and in NoHo and in everywhere else. We can't say only certain neighborhoods like Harlem, East Harlem, parts of Brooklyn, et cetera, are the places where we put all of the affordable housing. We should have affordable housing across the city. So I think that needs to happen. Secondly, I am very much a big proponent of these open streets. A block across from me, we have an open street, and it's been so amazing for my wife and my daughter, where we have literally gotten to know all of our neighbors because they bring their kids, the streets are blocked off, pedestrians can interact with each other. We're doing a range of activities, they're doing yoga, you name it. And when you have COVID and people aren't interacting, for kids to have that opportunity, my daughter's under 2, they have that opportunity to learn how to share. Just the other day, she wouldn't share one of her toys, and we got an opportunity to teach her, like, if you have 2 toys, you can give one to another kid. You don't have to have both and start crying. Just all those little lessons are important. So I couldn't agree with that part of this more. But we really desperately need a plan for how we do affordable housing in particular across the city. And it needs to be something that, is equitable, and it comes from City Hall.
Senator Krueger, how about yourself?
I find myself very much in agreement. I will simply add that when we're thinking about planning for the city, you have to talk about all 5 boroughs and not just take it one borough at a time, because I'm a strong advocate for affordable housing and always have been, including in the East Side where people say it can't be done, and of course it can be. But I find it fascinating that people will talk, and this mayor in particular, well, we'll just do 600, 700 foot, 800 foot buildings wherever we want because it's Manhattan and you guys can cope with that level of density, when that makes neighborhoods unlivable. And yet I find it fairly amusing that some of my colleagues from other boroughs, what, you want to go from 4 floors to 10 floors? That will ruin the borough. No, it won't ruin the borough. It won't even affect negatively your light and shadows on your block, but it will allow for more people and more affordable housing with smart planning, as opposed to some of these rezonings in the outer boroughs that have ended up being, nightmare gentrification problems, because we're not planning, as Gale described, we're not planning for protecting the people who now live in those communities and the quality of life they have, but we're also not planning effectively for where more affordable housing can and should go. I am opposed to Albany, even though I represent us in Albany, having the power over programs like 421A and J51. These are the city's property tax dollars that the city gets no say in, but they get taken away from the city as of right deals for whoever fits in the box of those programs. Those are not necessarily programs that actually give us significant new affordable housing, but they are deals that have gotten made between Albany and developers in New York City that translate into now, I think if you combine 421A and J51, it's like $3 billion of the city's property taxes per year that it doesn't collect. So we have an unfair playing field for everyone else. And it's not Gale Brewer, Manhattan Borough President, or Brian Benjamin, next city controller or whatever, making any of those decisions for the people of New York with the property tax money. It's deals that were made, frankly, between development companies and labor unions as to how they wanted to split up the pie. That's not planning, and that's not in the best interest of anyone. So I would really like to see us change all of that, which requires a big change in Albany as well as in the city. And
One quick addendum I want to add to that is it's not just the housing itself. We also got to think about mass transit. We got to think about schools. It's, one thing people say, oh, let's do more affordable housing. We got to think about the density that now brings to a neighborhood and to actually literally street blocks. I mean, there's some cases where you can bring thousands, hundreds of more units, but if you only have one entrance to the train that everyone has to use, that could be enormously taxing. So I think it has to be a planning, not just on the housing piece, but also on the infrastructure piece as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. And I'd like to introduce Congressman Adriano Espaillat. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll actually hand over the floor to you briefly. I know many of us have been following the back and forth over a stimulus deal in Washington. Wondering if you could give us a very brief update on negotiations there, and also what it might mean for Manhattan.
Well, I've been working hard to get the funding for the MTA, as I am the only city member in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. And we were able to successfully get $4 billion in the CARES Act early in the year. And then we successfully put $8 billion in the HEROES Act, which was passed over 4 months ago now, and the Senate has not acted on it. And then we went back and we made some compromises, and we put an additional agreement that we came up with, sort of like trying to meet in the middle. And there we had $140 million for transportation in total, including the $8 billion that had now ballooned to $12 billion for the MTA. And when we met with the other side of the aisle, their answer was that they were at zero. So that just gives you an idea of the complications in these three-way negotiations when Mnuchin and Pelosi were making some headway just about yesterday. McConnell came out and said that he didn't want a deal, an agreement before the elections. He had very conservative members of his caucus that were having a re-election and didn't agree with what we will be agreeing to. So this is a three-way negotiations. I think personally that there has to be an agreement between McConnell and the White House before we get anywhere. They have to be in the same page before we get anywhere. Well, before we begin to argue for our funding, a level of fundings, which include, of course, $100 billion in rental assistance, which is very critical. Yesterday, I got a call from a constituent that said that the landlord was threatening and wanted to get him out because he was backed up 2 months in rent. People are backed up as much as 5 months, 6 months backed up in rent. And so we need to come in and save them, right? And not only the tenants, this is good for small landlords as well that have obligations with the banks. We have the unemployment monies that we are fighting for, the $600. And of course, everything is also connected, joined at the hip with state and local government. And this is where the White House has been dramatically opposing any help for the states and the municipalities. And we think it's critical that we do that, because no matter how much we send to the states and the cities, if they don't have the revenue, then they're gonna have to make cuts as well. In addition to that, we wanted a stimulus check for $1,200. And of course, there is funding for testing, tracing, and treatment, as well as another round of PPP for small businesses. I went to visit a small businesswoman in Harlem this morning who got her PPP loan, sort of like at the beginning when it first became available, but she's really struggling now to open up her restaurant. And now is when she really needs the help. She was able to take care of payroll, and she basically got them to clean up and get the establishment ready so that when they would open up, they would be prepared for that. But now that she's actually doing it, she needs additional help. And the restaurants themselves have put forward their own proposal for over $140 billion that we are also pushing for as a Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives. So that's where we are. I'm hopeful that our leader will be able to push harder and get us a good agreement, and that people will get the help that they need.
Well, thank you for the update. I really appreciate that and know what we're dealing with. You were talking so much about the politics too, the decision making. So I want to keep the politics discussion going, specifically with a look to local politics and 2021. If you're watching this, you probably know that New York City has some massive elections coming up next year: mayor, comptroller, borough presidents, every single city council seat. So I want to ask our panelists, what are some races to watch? And, specifically, if there are any candidates that myself and all of our viewers should keep an eye on, should be, paying attention to as we move closer to the Democratic primaries in 2021.
You should watch that controller's race. That one's going to be a fisticuff. That's one to watch.
Well, actually, Espaillat, we'll start with you, Congressman. Of course, controller race, but any other races and any other candidates that you think we should be keeping our eyes on?
Well, I've already endorsed my good friend Scott Stringer for mayor, and there's a bunch of. I'm getting ready to support other folks for controller, obviously, but there's a bunch of city council members, many women. I like the fact that we're making that an objective, right? To have 21 for 21, right? At least. And there's a lot of good qualified young and qualified candidates. I'm supporting Carmen de la Rosa for city council in the 10th district. Sean Abreu, who's a young attorney, also in the Mark Levine district. There is a young woman in the Bronx that in the Krueger seat who I'm looking at to see if I could support. She is very qualified, and I think was just endorsed by the 21 for 21 group. And I'm looking at these races, and these young people are the next generation, right? And I think that we should be very supportive, embracing them, giving them all the help that they need to ensure that we have a vibrant and active city council. I know that there's folks here. Liz Krueger's a vintage senator, as I am not a vintage congressman, but I was a vintage member of the legislature up
That's
there.
a nice way to say, oh, well, thank you so much.
Nice? It's like a good wine, right? It's like a
Well, I will turn it over to our more experienced state senator on the call, Senator Krueger. What races should we be paying attention to in 2021, and what candidates?
Well, I think everyone, obviously. I am not making any predictions for myself yet. I am watching and listening. And I joke, but not totally joke, that 21 is the next calendar year. I'm still really worried about the 2020 elections. And if we do not succeed in taking back the White House and the US Senate, I am planning to offer the state of New York to Canada as the new Southeast province. So I don't know that we'll have the same election cycle here if we become a province of Canada. And some people say maybe they won't want you. And I say, oh no, we have many great things they would want. And if they don't want us, we can declare war and immediately surrender. And then they'll have us anyway. So, you're smiling, but this is my plan B, just in case everything doesn't go as all of us New Yorkers hope it will go in 2 weeks. So right now, I'm
your opinion in the prime minister race soon enough. Then
exactly, he's a fine man, that prime minister, and they have national health care already. So it might throw off a couple of people's plans. I believe Brian Benjamin has plans for 21. Gale Brewer has new plans for 21.
Oh, that's right, Gale.
The congressman and I are still hoping to be in office after 2 weeks from now. Who knows, right? So, but I will just watch and say, of course, the races in New York City are critical for those who live in New York City. And I think after President Trump's period of history, no one is ever allowed to say it doesn't matter who you elect. It doesn't matter what the office is. Even the least relevant office, you cannot elect horrible people because it encourages them to keep going. So you have to take every race extremely seriously, and you have to go for competence and morals, character, and shared values. So they all matter.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to Gale Brewer now. Actually, it was alluded that you may have some 2021 plans, so fill us in.
Jeff Colvin, you know how I am. I don't think, but picking up on what Liz said, there was a Latina woman who ran for city council in Boston. It's an at-large seat, and she won by 1 vote.
Yeah.
Don't mess around with the voting, and everybody must vote. I'm a little bit like Liz. I wait and see. I'm not too good on endorsing. So 2021 is going to be important. I believe the Democrats will win, but that's just the beginning. Governing is as difficult as it is being the elector. And so the question then becomes, because Democrats and the Congressman is doing a great job, but when I was head of federal for Dinkins, I remember people around the country do not love New York City. They take our highway money, they take our Medicaid money, they want everything. And so the issue is going to be, thank God that Trump is gone, but what are we going to do to make sure that New York City is whole and our residents? So there's just a lot at stake, and having to think about all of that. I do sit on the board of the National League of Cities, so I have a little sense of what goes on around the country. But to answer your question, Jeff, I just watch.
Well, we'll be eagerly awaiting to see if there's anything else. Senator Benjamin, what should we be watching in 2021?
Well, I definitely think we should be watching the controller race. I think that's a race that we should all focus on. But no, let me say, in all seriousness, I think Congressman Espaillat made some really good points. I think that in addition to what Liz is talking about, we need competence. I think we definitely need to make sure we have a mayor who can not only have good values, but actually can execute those values with plans. But I think we also need to make sure that we have diversity, right? We have a a very diverse city. The Latino community, the African American community, the white community. I mean, we all should be a part of the leadership of this city. And so I think that that's important. We have to make sure all those people are very competent, but and can manage the job that they're in. But I think we have to really double our efforts, particularly in this moment, in the Black Lives Matter moment, just in the moment of us acknowledging race in America and identity politics in America. In New York City, everyone needs to be represented and everyone needs to have a seat at the table. So I think that's got to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you. And, frankly, I should have opened with this. I do just want to note that City and State has been through some major changes lately. We're getting a new editor-in-chief, and, we're more committed than ever to really reflecting New York City's and New York State's diverse array of people. That was a weird way to put it. Sorry, I'm getting awkward. But hey, look, we're trying to do a better job on covering all of our communities, all of our races that represent.
Just real quick, Jeff, and I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, I think the Assemblywoman Diana Richardson piece was very difficult for many of us. She is one of the most powerful and influential and leading figures. And so for a lot of us, we had some real concerns with how that piece went down. And I'm glad that you guys apologized and are moving forward and thinking about staffing in a way that's more reflective of the city. But because Diana Richardson, she's really a treasure to many of us. So I'm glad you make some changes on that front.
You put it much better than me. Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you all for joining us. Now I'd like to shift it over quickly to Q&A from the audience. Thanks for all for who asked questions. And the top question is actually, it's about the borough president, but really for anybody, it's question is that Borough President Brewer shepherded in a mom and pop rezoning to protect small neighborhood businesses. And is this a program that should be done borough-wide or in other specific neighborhoods? And if so, why not? So that sounds like a question for the borough president. So please let us know. And also, sorry, but let's please keep it quick so we can get to a couple more questions.
I'll be very quick. It basically states that from 72 to 110, a new store can be 40 feet long and the bank can only be 25 feet long. It took 2 years because you have to do some kind of a study. So I'm for it. We're looking at it, for instance, in Community Board 3, which is a Lower East Side. It's a very cumbersome. It doesn't work all the time, so it probably needs some tweaks. But yes, I think it is a beginning of saying keep the stores so that they can be mom and pops. It's a zoning solution, and there are other solutions, I think, too.
Thank you. And I guess I'll just have a question for anybody else here. In fact, I'll ask the Congressman this one because of your position on the Transportation Committee. What's the post-COVID transportation plan for Manhattan, particularly looking at bikes, bike lanes, bus lanes? What can the city do during and after this pandemic?
Well, we saw the emergence, obviously, of alternative methods of transportation. We saw Rebel come into many of our neighborhoods. And of course, they suspended their services until they adopted new and more responsible practices that I think in many ways address some of the issues. Still, they still have a way to go. But, I've also introduced legislation to get dollars behind alternative transportation infrastructure that will include some bike lanes and alternative means of transportation. But, there's no guarantee that we will go back to what we used to call normal, right? I don't know if anybody is going to rush to like a crowded Yankee game right away. People are going to, be careful and they're going to be suspect. And so we must usher our public transportation system back in a responsible way. And that means, deep scrubbing at night, a responsible, hygienic plan for strap hangers. Perhaps we could increase transportation flow at certain times of the day and then at others, so we can stagger the workday for people so not everyone will be at the subway at the same time. Emergency workers used our transportation system during the entire pandemic. You know, I used to go down to 207th Street, not too far from my house, and say hello to the bus drivers. And they started by putting their own concoctions, you know, to separate their seat from the rest of the bus. And eventually something was developed to keep them safe, right? And many of them turned out to be positive too, by the way. They're exposed on a daily basis. So we have to do better for these folks. It requires funding, obviously. You know, I'm working on the 2nd Avenue subway, the second phase. And Liz knows about the first phase, and Gale knows about both phases. But if we're gonna have that second phase of the 2nd Avenue subway leading to 125th Street, we're gonna have to keep the MTA budget whole, so it doesn't get raided. The money that we have already captured for that particular project is not compromised for something else that's also of greater value, perhaps. So we have to make smart decisions. The funding has got to be there. There's got to be deep cleaning, and we got to be smart on how we have sort of like a strap hanger flow in the subway system.
Thanks so much. And look, I could talk about transportation forever. Any of our other panelists have, you know, specific thoughts on how we can make Manhattanites move in the coming weeks and years?
Well, we've certainly seen a number of successful projects with expanding bus service across town and up and down, with having more bus lanes and having more, you know, the express buses versus the local. And I think that is crucial for thinking through the future also, because the demographics of Manhattan are that we are an aging borough. And that is partly, particularly the east side and the west side, partly because of the kind of housing we have here and that people are aging in place in the apartments they've lived in their whole lives. So, you know, bike lanes, I strongly support bike lanes and bikes, but we're going to need to make sure that as some of us become vintage, I like that term, Congressman, now everybody gets to become vintage, that we have transportation they can use to get around the city. And buses are an incredibly important source of public transportation for vintage New Yorkers and people also with disabilities who maybe won't make it up or down those stairs that we won't live long enough to replace with elevators and escalators to get on the subways. We don't want them to have to get in cars. So I'm going to pitch the importance of bus service.
Do you have like a word of the day at City and State or something?
Vintage today, absolutely. Well, hey, I just want to say thank you all for joining us. For all of you watching, if you're in the nonprofit sector, City and State has a webinar on nonprofit efficiency and electronic payments coming up on Thursday, October 29th. And on Tuesday, November 17th, if you're looking to make money from the government, we have a virtual government procurement conference. So check those out on cityandstate.com/events for more information. And our panel, State Senators Brian Benjamin and Liz Krueger, Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer, and Congressman Adriano Espaillat, thank you so much for joining City and State for our webinar on a post-COVID Manhattan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.